Hi, class. Today we'll be looking at another strategy for bringing your writing to life. These techniques are part of the writer's toolbox and they are essential tools. Dialogue and thought shots bring an energy to your writing in a way that nothing else can. The best way to get started is to look at an example. So consider Charlie Brown and Linus. Linus says, "I saw the bulletin board, Charlie Brown. You and the little red-haired girl are supposed to be partners in a science project." Charlie says, "Well, I guess that means I just have to go over and introduce myself to her. I'll go over and say, 'Hi, partner. I'll take the failing grade.'" The best dialogue allows characters to speak in their own voices, and you can see that happening here with Linus, the good student, the kid who recited Bible verses at the Christmas pageant, the one who knows all about science projects. Meanwhile, Charlie's dialogue shows his awkwardness and insecurity. Charlie's own words convey those traits better than any adjective could. So, one of the best uses of dialogue is to show characters' traits and personalities. Let's say someone doesn't want to go to the zoo. The way they say it tells us something about who they are or who they think they are. So you have a person who says, "No thanks." A person who says, "Nah, dog." A person that says, "I'd really like to go, but I already have plans." Have somebody who says, "Hell no, that place stinks." Or a person who says, "No way, I hate seeing all those animals behind bars. Unless, are we going to break them out?" Although dialogue is so useful, some people are scared off from it because of formatting. So let's take a minute and look at our commas and periods. For basic dialogue, you begin with the tag at the beginning of a sentence. The tag provides information about who is speaking. The tag is followed by a quotation mark, and the first letter in the quoted dialogue is capitalized. At the end of the dialogue, include a period and conclude it with a question mark. The order at the end there is what trips people up. You want the period to come before the end quotation mark. So here's an example. You have your tag, "He said," which is followed by that comma right there. And there's always a comma right there after introducing a quotation. Then you have your first quotation mark, a capital letter, beginning the dialogue, and then a period followed by the end quotation mark at the end. You can also set up dialogue with the tag at the end of the sentence. In this case, you have your comma at the end of the quoted sentence. And this tag here is lowercase rather than being uppercase as it was in the example. So it looks like this. Quotation mark, "Hey buddy," comma, quotation mark, lowercase, "she replied," period. Okay, let's make it a little harder. What if your dialogue is a question? Well, first I'd get rid of that comma and replace it with a question mark. Let's see if I can do it. There we go. When you're, that's really the only difference between regular dialogue and questions. It looks like this. The quotation marks, "Are you going to the party?" Mark. Just a second. It looks like this. Quotation mark, "Are you going to the party?" Question mark, quotation mark, lowercase, "he asked." That lowercase h is probably the most confusing part about formatting questions in dialogue, but now you know. And the same formatting works for exclamation points too. Note the order: exclamation point, quotation mark, lowercase s. Okay, well, what if you have your tag interrupt the dialogue? In that case, you set up the first portion of dialogue exactly the same with the comma and the lowercase tag ending here. ending with a period. Then you add the rest of the dialogue following that and put it in quotation marks. You don't need another tag. It looks like this. Quotation mark, no, comma, quotation mark, lowercase s, she said, pyramid, quotation mark, I have to work, period, quotation mark. Just like that. So let's say you have a big section of dialogue and you've written he said and she said a bunch of times already. In that case, you may want to use action to indicate who is speaking. You don't always have to use a speech tag. So to have a character who's speaking, so you can have a character who's speaking do something. That will tell the reader who is speaking without having to write he said again. One thing to notice here is that we don't need that comma that we place before a speech tag. Almost always you'll want to simply use a period after describing the action to introduce the speech. So he may say, he grabbed her hand, period. Come on, skip work. The goal here is to aim for variety. Use front tags, end tags, interrupting tags, and action to create rhythm and variation in the dialogue. And you can actually add even more variety by adding Thoughtshots. Thoughtshots is a different term for the words internal dialogue. They let you get into you and the reader get into your character's head. Oftentimes, Thoughtshots look like the angel and devil on the shoulder, arguing about what happened and what to do next. There are different ways of punctuating Thoughtshots, but the most common way is to put internal dialogue into italics rather than quotation marks. But otherwise, the format is the same with the thought tag followed by a comma, a capital letter at the beginning of the thought, and a period at the end. It sounds like this. Tag. Oh, wait a second. One thing to notice is that we have a capital letter here and a capital letter here in the same places that you would with a standard quotation. I don't know what those were for. So it sounds like this. Tag. He looked her over and thought, comma, capital, I'd like to take her home to meet my parents, in italics. You do the same thing with end tags and Thoughtshots. Just italicize and leave off the quotation marks. So it may look something like this. What a hopeless tool, in italics, comma, lowercase, tag. There may be a special case in which your internal dialogue has dialogue. It's easier to look at an example than try to explain this. So, she's having a thought right here. Italics, more like, comma, no way will I go to a party where he has access to the drinks, quotation mark. Lowercase, she thought with an internal smirk. Okay, well now you just mix and match. We've got all of these different Thoughtshots and we have our dialogue, different types of dialogue. As you're building a dialogue, you need to also be wary about what you're doing in terms of formatting. So first off, the dialogue is all double-spaced. You'll want to start a new paragraph each time a new person speaks and tab over the first line of each new paragraph. What does this look like? Tab. He said, hello, my friend. He looked her up and down and thought, wow, I'd like to meet or take her home to meet my parents. New line. Tab. Hello, buddy, she replied. Ugh, why does this bozo always have to look at me like I'm a prime steak, she thought, trying to keep her face neutral. New line. Tab. Are you going to the party? He asked. Fingers crossed, fingers crossed, fingers crossed. New line, tab. No, I have work. More like, no way will I go to a party where he has access to the drinks, she said with an internal smirk. So why does all this punctuation matter? Most of you won't go on to write novels after all. Well, when we get to the research section of the paper and we start using in-text citations, you will use pretty much the exact same formatting. Let's have a little preview. So when you cite your sources, you will set up your sources with their names and tag their speech, just the way that they do with dialogue. Does this look familiar? The formatting is the same with dialogue and quotation. Something else we want to be the same when we start using sources is that you can make more natural research writing if you think of your sources as characters who are talking to each other. And you want to think of yourself as a character too. Good use of sources looks like good dialogue. So let me read this out loud. I have been struggling with writer's block, feeling like my writing isn't good enough and worrying about whether it's good or bad. Whenever that happens, I have to remind myself of the two question Linda Berry identifies in her graphic novel, What It Is. She argues without the two questions, so much is possible. I feel like I'm in good company because Anne Lamott agrees with Berry. As she explains in Bird by Bird, almost all good writing begins with terrible first efforts. You need to start somewhere. We will get into the nitty-gritty details of sources later, but for now, I just want you to know that practicing with dialogue will eventually serve you well when you have to do research. In the meantime, happy dialoguing.